I wound up having to use 3 inches of standoff on a DA50 to get the prop to clear the cowl. That didn't worry me because the Axe has such a reputation for being tail heavy because of the long tail moment. Plus the DA50 just isn't all that heavy a motor in the first place. And because the Redwing 50cc Yak has such a nice motor box on it, we can hang other stuff up front as well. You always want the ignition up here as far from the radio as we can get it. I mounted the ignition battery on the outside up front, and that left me room on the inside. And that's where I stuck the two 7.4 volt LiPo 5000 milliamp packs that run the receiver and servos. And there was still room up front to get the throttle servo up there as well. In addition to getting its weight forward, I like to have very short, stiff throttle linkages. It's hard to control an idle if you got slop in the throttle linkage. This is the failsafe pin and flag switch that operates all the electronics. It's failsafe because if this switch fails, it fails to the on position, not the off position. That's a pair of charging jacks, and I can also check battery voltage through those as well. This is the ignitions plate, and it has this LED when it's armed, and a charge jack that we can also check battery voltage there as well. And it even has a nifty fuel dot built into it. I should note that the only thing connecting all this ignition stuff to the receiver is a fiber optic cable. There's no electrical connections whatsoever. I'm using a 20-ounce Rotoflow tank, and the back end of that is butted up against the wing spar. If we can keep the tank as close as possible to the center of gravity, the CG doesn't change much as you burn fuel off. The SmartFly power board weighs pretty much nothing, so that's okay behind the CG point. I didn't have a lot of room to put it anywhere else anyway. And the only other thing back here is the rudder servo, and that's the only place we could put that. I think a choke servo is just extra weight on most planes, so I add a little bit of light with this simple choke rod. Pushing the rod in puts the choke on, pulling it back out pulls the choke off. It's real simple and it can't short out. Now before somebody starts jumping up and down, there's no ignition hooked up here yet. I just put a little bit of gas in the tank and hold my finger over the end of the carburetor and then turn the prop until the gas comes up through the line. It's a lot easier drawing it up this way than trying to flip it up later when you can't get at the carburetor. I use the cardboard method for cutting my cowls because it works and it's just as frustrating as any other way I've found. This muffler's kind of large and that kind of complicated things as well, but it sounds great. The cardboard gets taped to the fuselage behind where the cowl goes so we can lay it over the cowl when we install that. The front of the cowl is open enough that I could reach in with a pencil and get a rough tracing around the cylinder head. As a matter of fact, all of these tracings are going to be just guides, because once you cut these out, then there's going to be a lot of trial and error before you get it fit right. Just remember that we need roughly twice as much area to let air out as we do to get air in. You can leave a little room around everything that comes out of the cowl. This is during that trial and error period, and you don't need to hear some of the stuff that was being said during this time. But I did get everything to fit. And here I've got everything hooked up, and everything's in its place. We're ready to check the CG for the last time before we take it out to the field. I had a guy tell me once that he always charges his batteries fully before he checks the CG. And I let it go at that because I know he was getting ready to tell me that they're heavier when they're full of electricity. This is like 4 a.m. on the morning of the Maiden Flight, and I'm just putting on some of the graphics and getting everything ready to go. No, I'm usually up at this time of day and working. I was anxious this time around because I wanted to get to the field and fly the Redwing 50cc Yak, and I think you'll see why. In the next video, I mean.